Welcome Wargamers, Doug here from 2Plus Stuff, and today we're going to talk about how to build units rules-wise when it comes to the game Hobgoblin by Mike Hutchinson. This is his latest game off the back of his immensely successful Gaslands, where you could custom create any kind of car you wanted to have all kinds of cool, like road rage, missile launchers, all this kind of stuff, car battles. Now he's translated that into a very simplified and streamlined rank and file fantasy battles game. Keep in mind, I say fantasy battles because it works for any kind of fantasy army. However, you could play Napoleonics with this. It's anything rank and flank. So this is going to be a very short video. My other one, I talked about how you can actually make the bases and cool little scenic dioramas for your regiments and that kind of stuff. In this one, we're going to focus on how to translate the models you have on your shelf into this game rules-wise. See what I did there? One's about modeling translation. This one's about rules translation. Has some big brain stuff right there. And to do this, we're going to focus and pick on the exact same unit that I did in that video. That is being my Feral Orcs, Bone Splitters from Games Workshop. So what is the process using the Hobgoblin kind of beta rules? I'm going to be doing a screen share with. I say beta rules because this is the document that I have early access to. They're doing the Kickstarter right now. The finished complete product is done. This is just something I'm using to put together a reference video for you folks. But we're going to walk through step by step of like how do we articulate this unit and choose appropriate keywords for it. Keep in mind the details may change as things go on, but this is the basic information you need for every single unit in the game. For those of you who are driving and just kind of listening along, I'll go through them real quick. You have light, ranged, and heavy infantry. So that's going to be like skirmish units, bows and arrows, heavily armed dudes. And there's also monstrous infantry, things like minotaurs, werewolves, any kind of crazy things you got. There's light and heavy cavalry, chariots, a war wagon, which is kind of an open concept for you kind of fill in whatever you'd like, whether it's siege equipment or, kind of things that move, that kind of deal. Then there's monsters, beasts, and artillery. Artillery is just big cannons that don't move. Along with them are a whole host of stats and things that have more to do with the core rules of the game. Just kind of understand. I'm going to put this as a very broad idea as we're just selecting our units. There's essentially two mini games of rock, paper, scissors happening. There's the one that's very obvious where maybe like spearmen units are good against cavalry. Cavalry's good against infantry. Infantry's great against maybe the war machines or something like that. That's happening. But then there's also a second game with how those units are ordered, given with the order word right here on their stat line. Units are either close, meaning they're locked in formation. They're loose, meaning they're kind of just a smattering of dudes all around a banner, or they are what's called free, meaning they're solos. Think things like the Doom Wheel. It's a big construct that moves on its own, doesn't have a unit with it. And that has its own kind of rock, paper, scissors. Loose units are strong against free ones. Free ones are strong against close. Close is strong against loose, and so on. So when you're kind of picking your unit, right, I'm doing my Feral Orcs, think about how they kind of fall into things, right? These are my base infantry. They are disposable. I do not care about them in the slightest. So I'm going to say that they are light infantry. They don't possess any particular strengths or weaknesses as noted by the notches on their attack and defense stats, and they come in the most basic footprint. I think that's appropriate for them. So right now in the video, go ahead and think about the model or models you want to use. Are they cavalry? Are they flyers? Whatever it is. When it comes to things that are flying or not, that's a keyword that you add later on. So besides being a flying creature, think about how they act. If it's a swarm like bats, you might do beasts as their starting profile, and then you can add, flying later on. If I wanted to do, for example, my rogue idol of Mork or Gork, I would then use the monster keyword or unit type. Now, once you've selected what type of unit it is, and I'm just going to throw this out there, this chart is super easy to print off, and I'm going to be showing you how to, for those of us who are more visual learners, it's really nice to print this off and take scissors and cut these things into strips, and that way you can kind of construct your army that way. I'm not somebody who's really good at just kind of remembering all this or doing pen and paper. I like the visual stuff, so yeah, I'll show you what I mean later on. But you're going to pick the type of unit that you have. Next, we're going to move down to keywords. Now I'm just going to leave it here on the creating a unit screen and talk more casually from an overview type perspective. Now that you have what kind of unit you're trying to articulate, we have to choose keywords that really hone it in a bit more. The example I gave before is if you have a thing of bats, you would choose the beast type because they're animals. And then of course you would want to choose the flying keyword that enables them to do their kind of signature thing, which is fly around and be a swarm. There are two types of keywords: strengths and weaknesses. Strengths, as you might imagine, add cool abilities, make them more devastating in combat or more heroic. It's how you can choose to make, your heroes keywords like wizards, and now they can throw lightning balls and cool things like that. It's how you add the flavor to whatever you're trying to describe. Or think of it as the rules version of adjectives. How do we articulate what we're doing? Now, the one thing I want to add on keywords, and it's actually listed here in the rules for Hobgoblin, is say a keyword like bloodthirsty. Well, that might not work for what you're trying to articulate if your guys are a whole bunch of, holy knights, but consider that rules mechanically wise, they would be bloodthirsty against evil things. So even though it's not a nice word to describe good people, you can see mechanically how they would be bloodthirsty. I digress. What I'm saying is, don't associate a moral aspect to the description words for Hobgoblin. The other one is weaknesses. Weaknesses actually subtract the cost of a unit, making them cheaper, but always at a cost. These are things like they run away more easily, they're worse in combat, they're slow, they're dumb, and they don't take orders, that kind of thing. But it does reduce the cost. So if you have a very particular use for units, like say archers, you don't care if they're smart, they're archers, they're supposed to be in the back, and if they get charged, things are going bad anyway. That's a great use for weaknesses. So we've established kind of what the different keywords are. Let's talk about restrictions. Whatever unit you chose comes with its own set of keywords. For example, infantry has the infantry keyword. Ranged infantry has infantry keyword plus ranged attacks with a range associated with them. That's all very intuitive. Restrictions when it comes to adding keywords. For starters, you can never have more than 2 weakness keywords for a unit, or rather you can never purchase more than 2, meaning they kind of throttle how much you can reduce the point cost for things. That's the idea. You can never purchase something that has reserved next to it. This is going to be more for your core rules or special, rules that they want to give out to only specific units. Each unit can only purchase a type of keyword once, meaning Swift 2 will add 2 to your speed characteristic. You can't buy Swift 2 twice and have it be Swift 4. Likewise, below that, if you already have a keyword, like a heavy cavalry has tough, you can't then buy tough. So no doubling up. And the last one here is that artillery may only have the following weaknesses purchased: self-destruct and short range. They have a little link to an army builder. It's basically just a nice Excel doc, but it does kind of help you organize your thoughts there. There's a quick unit cost reminder, which is very handy. And they have this set of rules for courteous army construction. Because this game is models agnostic and you can come to the table with 2 completely different things and ideas of what a game should be, they do give you some great guidelines to make it very easy for you and your opponent. Basic things, for example, don't use the same minis to represent different kinds of units. Your light infantry should look a little bit different from your heavy infantry, and if the differences are minute, point them out to your opponent so they know. For example, Bone Splitter models from Games Workshop, the difference between basic Savage Orcs and their elite version, the More Boys, is just what they're holding, but the models are identical, so you just got to point that out. Don't use models that are so mismatched that you can't figure out what they're trying to articulate. This would be, I think, a good mix of don't put cavalry and 3, gargantuan bases and then one little 25mm on the same thing. You can't tell what it is. One little caveat that I will add to that, however, is if you did see my video about how to do the basing, is I like the idea of taking different sculpts and stuff like that to represent special rules or keywords. So I took the big Stabba and I'm going to use that to represent, these guys have devastating charge, because that would certainly devastate whatever it hits. But, taking a step back, anyone can look at the unit and be like, that's a bunch of Savage Orcs. That's all I mean. But, they're nothing crazy, I don't have Boar Boys mixed in and wizards and all these kinds of things. And the third suggestion is just to have a written copy of your list. I'll leave this here for now. This is a total list of all the keywords. Of course, you have 2 rows of strengths, 1 row of weaknesses. All of the actual descriptions, the mechanical descriptions of what these do, are in the back of the rulebook, and they're written in very plain English. For many of them, they do exactly what they sound like, right? Flying lets your units fly, and it has the rules associated for movement in that section. You know, terrifying is going to affect doom in some way. Tough is increasing the resiliency. These things are all very obvious. The ones that I do suggest you kind of read through are the ones that almost, I guess, in common conversation have more of a moral implication. Just kind of like think if that could be used to articulate whatever unit you're bringing. So bloodthirsty, like as my example from before. Holy knights don't sound inherently bloodthirsty, but of course if they're hunting, chaotic cultists, well of course they'd be bloodthirsty for them. Merciless is another example of that. Trample, maybe your units are wielding something, some kind of crazy esoteric thing. That's what you've modeled. Trample could be a fun thing. And you'll notice here their associated keyword cost. Some things like monsters have a modifier. It's listed on their unit entry. And so like a monster doubles the cost of keywords. So his bloodthirsty would be 100 points, not 50. There's also a list of weaknesses, which again, reduce the cost of a unit by the amount described here. Now, I actually had a great conversation with Greg Horton from Electi-Studios, and I was like, how do you imagine players approaching the subject of creating your own list? And actually, the way that he printed off or created these Excel docs with the nice keyword costs and everything was that if you're working on a base, let me put that off to the side, you can actually print these things off and use them if you're more of a visual learner like I am. And so what I'm going to be doing is walking through this, which is my recreation of my Savage Orcs. As mentioned before, I decided to make them light infantry, and then for their keywords, I wanted to walk through the different kinds of descriptors that I wanted to use. So the first one here is devastating charge. Because I wanted to include the big stabba just for modeling purposes, I had to have this rule as well. And reading the rule itself, you can see it just does a great job of articulating this. It's a strength. If this unit advanced 6 inches or more this round, it may decrease its target number for combat attacks by 1 to a minimum of 2. So now it basically increases the number of successful hits that I am going to deliver, provided I did a charge move. The next thing that is common to specifically like feral style orcs is that they are faster than others, so I chose Swift. And you'll notice in the core rulebook that like Swift X is a strength. The unit gains the speed plus X keyword. When you buy that as a keyword for a unit, you're buying it at Swift 2. So my basic units are 2 points faster in speed than standard light infantry. And the last one here is a weakness, Hollow. This makes them cheaper a little bit, but when this unit is removed from play, it does not provide mana tokens or fortune cards. This has more to do with the core rules, but typically in this game, when your units are dying, you're gaining what are called fortune cards, kind of little bonuses to help kind of turn the tide and subdue that sour taste in your mouth as things are dying. It really is a cool mechanic of the game. I cannot stress enough how cool it is. But basically this articulates that this type of unit is chaff. I do not care about them. I do not care if I get anything back as a result of sacrificing them. They are truly expendable. And if I were to think about like everyday humans compared to these, well, the everyday humans clock in at 300, right? That's your base humanoid. We'll call it the base vanilla profile. These guys come in at 375 with base 300, plus 100 for the 2 strengths, minus 25 for the 1 weakness. Boom, 375. I think they represent kind of the more expensive but very aggressive style of orc play that I would expect out of feral orcs. Now, one thing I also want to point out here is that you do not have to upgrade anything with keywords. If you just want to play as like a simplified, again, rock, paper, scissors within rock, paper, scissors style of game, this still has a lot of depth because you get to choose one regiment as your general. They get special bonuses and command abilities. You can have wizards, that kind of thing. Like, there's still a lot to be explored here without the minutia of adding keywords. I just think it's a lot of fun to try articulating different units in different ways. It's a thing that I enjoyed about one-page rules. Creating your own characters and stuff is a lot of fun there, and I like it here. What's nice is that with these little, here I'll go back to the downward cam, these little things, one of the deals that I'm going to do is print them all off, cut them up like this, and then laminate them so that I can have nice little reference cards. Because one of the cool things that they did over with Hobgoblin is create a target number chart. So if you don't want to play the rock, paper, scissors to calculate the strength of something, you can go to this and it will literally tell you, hey, light infantry, if you're attacking this is what you need. This is in their quick reference section. And really you could just cut this out just like you did with the other one and create a nice little reference page that has all the information you could ever possibly want for your units. And so that's really it when it comes to creating individual units. Pick your unit type, associated keywords following the keyword restrictions that we went through, and then leaving yourself open to like, how can I model this? You know, I talked about having different kinds of models on there, but they're all cohesive with what I'm trying to articulate. Don't be shy about using cool minis to represent keywords because they help you remember that you have. That being said, also don't go super crazy and have things be so esoteric that no one knows what you're trying to represent. Now, of course, this was a demonstration on how to build individual units. If you would like a video that's more about creating the army, like, you know, strengths and weaknesses of various units in terms of army construction, how to create a general, wizard, magic, that kind of stuff, please let me know in the comments below. And if you have any way to help people, also leave those in the comments, because on my channel I always pin the most helpful comment to the top to help new players get into the game. So thank you all so much, and thank you so much everybody involved in the creation of this game. Electi-Studios, Mike Hutchinson, these guys are incredible artists and just game makers. Go support them by checking out this game over on Kickstarter. Thanks for watching, and happy wargaming.